If you've seen Squid Game, you know how much of a masterpiece this show is, but you also know how insane this would be if it actually existed in real life. Or maybe you wish it did so you could win some money. Now, before I begin, let me say the show is not based on what I'm going to be talking about today. This is just something that has odd similarities to the show. I know you've probably seen those TikToks claiming that it was based on a real life thing. Also, disclaimer before I begin, some details may be disturbing for some people. After the 1950s, South Korea had overcome scars left from the Korean War, and by the 1980s, the economy was booming. But there was one issue that was noticed by President Chun Doo-won was the poor and homeless people of South Korea. In April 1981, the president wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, Nam Duk-woo, ordering the South Korean authorities to purify the streets and take protective measures to crack down on the beggars and the homeless. In response to this, harmless social welfare centers were set up, or at least they seemed harmless. Eventually, all sorts of vehicles, such as buses, trucks, and vans, began to appear in large cities with signs reading Vagrants Transport Vehicle. And at the same time that these vans were appearing, people started going missing. All sorts of people were taken to these centers. Disabled people, children, specifically orphans. Haeungjebogjiwon, which has been nicknamed Korea's Auschwitz, was one of the biggest centers. On paper, it didn't sound too bad what was going to be occurring at the center. The owner, Park In-gwin, said that the people here would be given food, clothes, and education, and they would have to remain here for one whole year to be trained on how to lead a better life, and then they would be sent back out into the streets for a second chance. But this is not at all what was happening. First of all, the 1-year deal was completely a lie, and everyone who was taken here actually stayed here until 1987 when it was forced to shut down, which I'll get into that a little later. So before we get into the details of inside this specific center, I must say these people weren't just picked up off the street, or they didn't volunteer like in the show Squid Game. They were kidnapped for being poor or just homeless or appearing homeless, and there's many stories of people who survived being in this place of how they were kidnapped. Choi Seung-woo was kidnapped and taken to Haeungjebogjiwon when he was 13. He said one day on a walk home from school, a police officer asked him to stop and started searching through his bag. There was a half of a loaf of bread, which was left over from lunch given by the school. The police asked him where he stole the bread from, and Seung-woo didn't steal this bread, so he kept telling him that it was his. But the police officer didn't believe him, so he tortured him, which included burning his genitals with a lighter, and he kept beating him, demanding a confession that he stole this bread. So Seung-woo, wanting this to stop, he lied and said that he stole it. Soon after, a freezer dump truck arrived and he was forced inside. Now, this is just one of the many stories of how people were kidnapped. Now let's move on to the details inside of it. After arriving at this internment camp, and that's what I'm going to start calling it because that's what it was, they were forced to strip down and change into these outfits that look oddly similar to the ones in Squid Game. Everyone was also given a number rather than keeping their names, and they had to sleep on these beds. Over the years that each person stayed here, they were enslaved into unpaid labor, they were assaulted, raped, and brutally beaten, and there was a confirmed number of 657 deaths from all the years that this camp stayed open. Some other things that occurred here, which this information comes from victims who survived and have told their story about it. People here were rarely given the chance to take a shower. Lice began to get all over their bodies. Every single day, the only food given was rotten fish and stinky barley rice, and everyone soon became malnourished. One time, an inmate spoke out, asking why they were being held hostage and beaten, and that was a mistake because right after that, 4 men approached him and rolled him up in a blanket and began kicking him until he fainted and started foaming at the mouth. Then he was taken out of the camp and never seen again, and you can assume he died. And the boy I was talking about earlier, Choi Seung-woo, he said that when he was 13 and first taken to this camp, everyone that was there was split apart into their own platoons, and each platoon had a leader. So one night, this boy's platoon leader and some other guys came over to him, stripped him down naked, and poured a bucket of cold water on him. And at night, when Seung-woo was shivering in his bed because he was cold, wet, and naked, the platoon leader returned and raped him. And this happened for the next 3 days until he got transferred to another platoon. Later on, the platoon leader said he felt remorse for his previous actions, but he said that he did it for survival because he was in charge over everyone in his platoon, and if anyone escaped, then he would be punished for it and probably killed. So basically, he's saying he did that to scare everyone there to not leave. All of these horrors went on for years until 1 year in August, a man with the surname Kang, who was the brother of a man being held prisoner in this camp, was suspicious of mistreatment and sent a petition to the government to investigate this camp. Upon investigation, the owner took legal action against Kang for false accusations, and Kang was sentenced to 8 months in prison. So as I mentioned earlier, in 1987, all these camps had to close because it soon came out that these people were being tortured and killed instead of learning valuable things and being fed right and remaining healthy. I don't blame South Korea for not wanting this to be a part of their history. You can tell that they don't, because if you try to look up stuff about this, you will find articles about it, but there's not much in-depth information about it, and that's the reason that's all that I have for this video. But if you know more about this than I do, let me know anything that I missed. And as you can see, this is obviously not what Squid Game is based off of, but there are similar things like I mentioned. Just to recap, just like in Squid Game, it was the poor people of society that were taken to this place and then had to perform these acts of labor, which in Squid Game was doing the games. And if you stopped doing these acts of labor, then you would be killed. And also, as I mentioned, the outfits, the numbers, and the beds are similar too. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. If you want to see more history videos, or if you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. And I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, so it would mean a lot if you would subscribe to the channel and support me. And with that being said, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.